lovely group of Triumph motorcycles.
Yeah, and these are all your bikes, correct?
Yes.
These aren't on loan from anyone. These are all your bikes.
Yeah, my bikes, the vintage bikes I built, restored, built myself, because that's the only way I would be able to own them.
Yeah.
I don't have the kind of money to have someone custom build a vintage bike for me.
Sure.
But, you know, I've been around motorcycles my whole life, and particularly Triumph motorcycles. Because you have to to understand, you have to sort of go back to that period of time, like the 1970s. Now, this is a 68. In 1970, this motorcycle was
pretty new.
10 years old.
Yeah.
You know, mid to late 70s. That's kind of when I got into the hobby. And these were readily available. Because in the context of the time, there were a lot of Triumph motorcycles. The U.S. market was flooded with Triumph motorcycles. As a matter of fact, the U.S. market was Triumph's biggest market. They imported a lot of motorcycles. And they manufactured a lot of motorcycles during that period of time. We're talking about the old Meridian factory days, the original Triumph company, which is basically called Triumph Engineering back then. Through the decades, through the ages, Triumph as a corporation, as a company, as a motorcycle manufacturer has changed and developed to become what it is today, which is Triumph Motorcycles Limited. In the 1960s, Triumph, that was their heyday. They were really considered to be the best motorcycle built in the world.
Wow.
And they won all sorts of records, racing records and racing titles. And they were one of the fastest motorcycles too. You know, for me personally, it was just my own personal fascination. Anything with two wheels was just fascinating to me. Two wheels and a motor. That's what I grew up around.
Yeah. This trophy, man, speak to me. What makes the trophy the trophy? What sets it apart from the Bonneville? I'm familiar with the model Bonneville. I think if you're into cars or bikes or anything like Triumph Bonneville, it's a pretty synonymous name.
Right.
I couldn't tell you what makes a Bonneville a Bonneville. I just know that model, right?
Well, they're basically the same motorcycle, same chassis, same motor. The main difference is the Trophy or the Triumph Tiger. They're both 650 cc's. The Trophy and the Tiger have a single carburetor. The Bonneville has a dual carburetor. The Bonneville was probably considered the top of the line Triumph motorcycle at that time. These Triumphs back in the 60s retailed for anywhere between about $1,300 to maybe $1,500, $1,600, depending on where you lived in the United States.
Wow.
So, you know, which was a lot of money back then. You could buy a new car for $30,000.
Yeah, totally.
So that's the main distinction between these two models, a single carburetor versus dual carburetor. Obviously, the dual carburetor, more fuel, more air into the motor,
more power,
more horsepower.
Yeah, totally.
So, and I can definitely tell the difference between this and the 67 Bonneville behind me.
Got it.
When I ride it. The Bonneville it's a lot throatier, has a lot more power.
Yeah.
Off the line.
So essentially a frame, forks, geometry, really similar.
Identical.
So same platform. So really it just comes down to like power levels and what.
Yeah, and I think that is the genius of any manufacturer, is to be able to take your basic design, a basic matrix of a design, and keep reinventing and making it better. And that's what Triumph did for, 60, 70 years.
It's a gorgeous bike, man. I mean, I love purely aesthetic, but I love the colors. Just, it really nails that era, I think it's got great patina on all the aluminum, and man, this is a cool bike.
Yeah, I mean, these are they're really fun to ride, and that's the thing I think that most attracts me to pretty much anything, particularly motorcycles. If it's beautiful to look at and it's also functional, I'm all in.
Yeah,
the form is beautiful, aesthetically pleasing. You're talking about many, many decades to develop this.
Yeah.
And we have to understand, in the context of the time when Triumph motorcycles were developed, in Great Britain, Triumph motorcycle was an essential form of transportation for people. Here, the motorcycle sort of took on a different image culturally. It was more like a bad boy image,
Sure.
like, bad outlaws riding motorcycles. But in Great Britain, it wasn't viewed in that way.
It's just like a commuter, every man's vehicle, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that evolved that way. They had transportation tax and licensing taxes um, that for automobiles that weren't necessarily applied to motorcycles. So,
Got it.
and especially post-war, the whole country was destroyed, and people didn't have a lot of money, and they couldn't afford. Most people couldn't afford to buy and drive an automobile.
A vehicle.
So the motorcycle became a really great mode of transportation.
Sure. And Triumph was a popular one. Man, yeah, it's so cool. I love how that history just like drives like innovation too and the progress. So these two bikes, though, how much is original on these two bikes? How much work did you do? Because I've seen you in action. I know you do a lot of work on your own stuff. I know you fully restore bikes. You had that red one when I met you.
I had a '69 Triumph Tiger. Restored that, built it, and sold it, and used the proceeds to buy the 2019 Thruxton behind you.
Smart.
Play work up.
Wheeling and dealing. Yeah, that's
Right.
good.
Most of the restoration for me is I tear down the motorcycle. Typically, I'll do the paint work myself.
Mhm.
I do upgrades. I have a certain personal aesthetic when I restore
Yeah.
and rebuild these motorcycles.
You got your formula that fits you,
Yeah, and
how you like to ride.
exactly. And there's things that I do every bike, and I've rebuilt and restored many Triumphs over the years. So there's a few things that I like to tick off. I like the shorter British handlebars because the American bikes came with they call the Western bars, the big
Okay.
bullhorn bars. They're a little bit wider. Also, I always install electronic ignition.
Okay.
So these originally came with a dual points ignition system. That goes away, and I install an electronic ignition. It just allows the bike to run better, idle better,
Start.
eliminates starting and eliminates, these are both kickstart motorcycles, eliminates stalling at red lights. So I basically go through it. I tear most of the bike down, and I make a list of all the things that I think it needs, and I just go through one by one, and just tick off the list. Usually, rebuild the carburetors, clutch, cables, and brakes, new sneakers, new tires, typically rear shocks, rebuild the forks, seals, of course, the paint.
Yeah,
paint,
polish up the emblems. I mean, you got cool little decals and stuff. You had the mid-England on the head tube.
Right. Well, I make sure that those little earmarks are, because a lot of times they're missing, or if the bike has been, a lot of these bikes have been bastardized over the years. Multiple owners.
Yeah.
This trophy, the blue trophy, which is now painted the original stock color, that was originally army green when I got it.
Okay. Yeah, people like to chop these things up too, man. I mean, I've seen a lot of hardtail choppers, like bobbers.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cafe racers. I mean, people do all sorts of stuff with these bikes because for a long period of time, you could get into them very cheaply because no one really wanted them. The purists have always liked them, always wanted them, but a lot, it's a bike. It's an easy platform to customize upon.
Right.
So I think it's cool that what you're doing, Paul, preserving these bikes.
Right.
They're a little bit of a upgraded kind of hot rod, but period.
I have to say, and I will comment on that, is these are daily riders. These are not showroom 100-point concourse perfectly restored motorcycles. Far from that.
Totally.
I'm not saying that they are. These and I don't want them to be that, because if they were perfect, I wouldn't want to ride them. I'd be afraid to ride them.
Totally.
Almost, I mean, so I ride these motorcycles on a daily, weekly basis, and I use them, and sometimes I abuse them, but knowing that if I have a problem, I can fix it myself, and that's the key for me. Not everybody, but for me personally, is I've developed a skill set and the knowledge to be able to work on them myself.
Totally.
And work through the issues and the bugs and the problems. And these motorcycles do come with bugs. I mean, no doubt about it. But every individual motorcycle has its little personality and quirks.
Yeah.
And to find the good ones, because sometimes you'll buy an old motorcycle and it'll be a lot of compounded issues that sometimes it's very challenging for people to work through those issues.
Sure.
And it could just be a lemon. It could just be a bad bike that was abused over the years. I look for Triumphs that have matching numbers. That means the stamping on the engine and the stamping on the frame are the same. This way I know that's the original motor that came with that motorcycle from the factory.
Totally, yeah, just like a car. Very similar.
So that's one of the keys to look out for someone who's looking for an old vintage.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of the restoration and fun of the hobby is doing that fine tuning, that tweaking. It drives you nuts sometimes, right? But there's such a rewarding sense of accomplishment when you finally get that cable length right.
Oh, absolutely.
And the shift's good and the synchronization's good, right?
And you're smiling, man. You're riding a motorcycle and it's performing well and you're smiling.
I will attest, you do ride these things. If anyone follows Paul on Instagram, MotoCan, I'm like, I don't know when this guy works because he rides like 3 bikes a day, every day. Posting the video. It's pretty cool. So you're right on, Paul. So we just looked at some classic bikes and now I feel like we're taking like time machine, quantum leap forward in technology.
Yeah.
Not quite as much in design, but definitely technology and performance. So what do we have here?
Right. Well, here we have, this is the 2019 Triumph Thruxton 1200R.
Wow.
And this is basically a culmination of almost 100 years of development, R&D, engineering, and we've really gone into the modern age here. And I really believe at this point we are really in it's like the golden age of beautiful motorcycles.
Yeah.
Right now, we're living in it right now. And Triumph considers this a modern classic.
Okay.
So it has all the classic styling of a cafe racer, but of course it has all the modern upgrades, the modern accoutrements, if you will. This is fuel injected. It's a high output 1200 cc motor. This thing puts out almost 100 horsepower.
Wow. It looks fast just sitting here.
Yeah, I mean, the styling is amazing. And they've really done a great job designing this motorcycle to keep some of the classic, retro classic appointments. For instance, the housing that holds the fuel injectors. They actually made the housing look like an old AMO carburetor.
Yep.
Like one of these, like my 67 Bonneville.
Looks just like it. The strap on the tank, I see with the dual gauge pods, obviously the exhaust layout. I mean, there's so many nods, oil tank shape, the shape of the gas tank too. I mean, there's so many nods to the classic bikes, but yet it's still, clip-on bars. It's still like so modern looking.
It's really an amazing piece of machinery. And just to tick off a list of a few things that this bike has, it has fuel injection. It's a liquid cooled motor, so it runs a lot cooler, and that enhances the performance, of course. It has ABS, anti-traction control.
Wow.
ABS braking. Öhlins racing suspension, front and rear. Brembo disc brakes, dual front disc brakes. And to top it all off, it also has heated grips.
Wow.
So, but and this bike you can also get a fairing kit for this motorcycle. It's about $1,200. Comes with the bullet fairing and the wiring harness and the adapters, because these clip-on bars need to be lowered with the fairing kit. Yeah, I opted not to get into that. I like the bike the way it is. I mean, the fairing kit, no doubt, it makes the bike look really cool.
It looks cool, yeah. I've always been a fan of the cafe racer, but I think since like seeing the original Mad Max,
Oh
movie as a
yeah.
kid. I policed the Interceptor, the police bike,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just such a cool look, man. And
Yeah. Yeah.
they people bob the frame, go to like a real small single seat a lot of the times for that
Mm-hmm.
cafe racer. So you
Absolutely.
just got like 10 inches of tire hanging out the back. That's the only thing back there, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a cool. Like I like that you've kept this though, like stock and factory. I think
Well, it's relatively stock. The only thing that I have done to it is I installed a decat pipe, and it just allows the bike to breathe a little bit more, and it's a little throatier and gives it a little bit more power. But I mean, yeah, what an amazing motorcycle, and it's amazing that, I mean, not that long ago, probably 20 years ago, you would have had to have bought a bike, a stripped down version of this, and then bring it to a custom shop and maybe drop another $10,000 to um, have all these upgrades done. But here, today, right now, you can walk into a Triumph dealer and buy this beautiful, pretty much a high performance machine right off the showroom floor.
sure. It seems yeah, they should be checking IDs for how much these
Yeah.
bikes perform nowadays. It's kind of crazy. It blows
Mm-hmm.
my mind a little bit. Anyone can, and they're so much more accessible than like say like buying a Ferrari. You gotta have a lot of money to buy a Ferrari,
Yeah.
but these bikes are definitely certainly not cheap still.
Right.
But the performance you get, like the bang for your buck versus a car, like it's pretty nuts. I agree. It's crazy. You can basically walk in and just buy a full on like race motorcycle nowadays
Yeah.
off the showroom floor.
Yeah. But
Super cool.
there's a lot of technology that goes into these motorcycles. So, I mean, this bike was 2019 was about 15,000, give or take, um, and now they're up to about, I think, maybe 17, 18,000. But between 2019 and now 2023, they've also, in the last few years, they've done a lot of upgrades.
Got it.
The
More performance.
more performance. They've used high performance valves, trimmed a lot of weight off the design of the bike. Just amazing machines. I heard someone once say recently that if motorcycles were invented like today, they probably would make them illegal. Because if you think about the concept, two wheels with this powerful engine
Yeah.
and a bomb between your legs,
Yeah.
right? There's no way they would pass
I don't think that would get through any like focus group
safety.
or there's
Yeah.
no way,
Oh,
man.
sure.
Yeah.
Safety highway safety board
Yep.
committee meeting.
What's the bare minimum we can strap to an engine to get you down the road? It's like this is it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
cool, man. This I love the fact that it's vintage styling with modern technology, and I think I really resonate with this bike because it's a lot of what I love about watches that are styled vintage, but they're modern
right.
mechanical watches, clothing, the boots. I mean, we wear boots that are modeled after shoes from the early
Yeah.
1900s, but they're made with modern. They're still made a lot of the same way, but the
Right.
leather, the formulations of leather, the technology of that has progressed, and with our denim and everything, it's really
Absolutely.
that is a really big correlation there. So I think there's no
Yeah.
wonder you and I both like this bike because
Yeah.
of the other things that we like. Right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, and I think it really goes to this whole concept of form follows function, which is a term that I use a lot, but I can't really think of any other words or term to explain this overall arcing concept.
Yeah.
That if you have a beautiful form that's also 100% functional and it works, you pretty much don't change it.
Why would you change it?
Why would
Yeah.
you change it?
Yeah.
If it's working and it's aesthetically beautiful to look at, um, then you pretty much nailed it. You hit your target. And then what all that's really left from that point on is just to improve upon the matrix, your basic design that you started with.
Yep.
And that's what Triumph Motorcycle has done over the
Absolutely.
last 50, 60, 70 years.
Yeah.
And they've done it really well right up until today. They're still producing, I think, one of the best motorcycles in the world.
Yeah. Hey guys, thanks for joining us again for this awesome episode on Triumph Motorcycles.
Yeah, remember guys, it's Jimmy and Paul talking about it all on the Man Cave Club. See you next time.
It's the Man Cave Club.